Alright folks, it's time for one of my favorite animal groups out there. Mollusk! I'm a huge mollusk fan, always have been, always will be. I love the mollusk. There's so many cool forms, so many different types. It's just a really fun group, I like it a lot. So let's get at it. So here we are, we can see we're out on the tree, Mollusca. We also see that trochophore larval form pop up, because we are very much in Lophotrochozoa. That means we have the trochophore larval form. And so this is what they look like, the little young mollusk. It's free swimming, eats algae just as it grows and develops. Common in the mollusk, but also found in a couple other groups. It's just one of their common shares. So here's some of the different types of mollusks that we can see. So there's a few different classes we're going to explore. And there's one that we're not going to talk about too much, which is the tusk shells or Cephalopods, but the other ones we're going to look at and explore. So mollusk, 90,000 species, ton of species, so many, compared to a lot of other animal groups, for sure. So it's the second most diverse, and next to arthropods, which is just a staggering amount of species. Truly insane what they do. And then we have, this is one of the larger marine groups out there. And so characterized by having a soft body, but they can have a shell. So you can have a soft body, but overall hard parts. This is going to vary a good bit depending on what species you're looking at. Some have a much harder shell, others it's absent entirely. So it just depends. And they do have a coelom, but they're not a segmented type of organism, so they don't have that going for them. And their overall key traits for their body plan is they have a visceral mass, which is kind of the body, a foot, and a mantle. So they live in a wide variety of places across the ocean, but they can also be found with snails, which are mollusks. They can be found all over the planet, right? So you can find some of these, as high up as mountains. So like there's places they can explore and be at. So it's not totally uncommon. So yeah. Deep sea, hot vents, so all kinds of places they're found. They've been used by humans for a long time, really, because like pearls, right? They're a mollusk. They're made by mollusk. Jewelry with shells, pet snails are a thing. People eat them. So they're very important in terms of human use. I think that's why I've always been intrigued by them. I don't like eating them or anything. I just think they're kind of a cool group. And then they're also unique, and they use like the same organ for multiple functions. So like the heart and nephridia, which are like their kidney type things, are used for a variety of systems. So it's not just like one type of system. And they can also sometimes just change their gender to fit the other breeding partners. So you can have them like, oh, this is a hermaphroditic snail. It's going to assume the female role in this case or assume the male role in the next case. So there's a lot of that fluidity that occurs in these groups. So kind of cool. And so looking at the organization, remember we had the Platyhelminthes last time, which had the blind gut. Now we're past that. So we have a complete gut now, which means you have a mouth, anus, and then you have the three types of tissues, meso, ecto, and endoderm. You can see that found here. And this is their general body plan. So they have the mantle. You can see that in the purple, in that line, so it secretes the shell. You have the body mass, the visceral mass, which kind of just the bulk of the thing itself, and then the foot is the gray thing. So yeah, and the orange is the visceral mass. So that's the three main structures. They generally have all the other things too. It can just kind of look a little different depending on what you're looking at. It just depends. But their hearts, again, look at the thing, not that crazy. So yeah, not bad. That thing I just showed you, you don't really have to label that per se. You might have to label like a couple of things, like the mass of the foot or something, but like not like every structure on there. Just so you know. I don't want anybody to freak out, like, oh, I got to label, every single structure in the diagram, God, no. So yeah, cool. So that's a thing. And so they have this foot, and so the foot can actually vary a good bit too. So sometimes it's modified into tentacles. To where they'll just have, well, a lot of tentacles coming off, and arms. It's like in a squid. Other times there's just a full-on mass of a foot. They have that. They also have the mantle. So the mantle is there, and that is, it's this kind of tissue that secretes the shell if it has one, and it also has a cavity in it that's used for breathing. breathing and excretory purposes. So that's cool that they have that. And they have a radula. And this is found everywhere except for the bivalves. They kind of do their own thing, so we need a radula. This is used for predation, and so you can see it in the picture in the middle there, that sharp point there. It's kind of like their tongue, and it's used to help like pull on and like latch onto prey. So it's pretty intense. And the mantle cavity is where like water will pass through and then go past the respiratory structures and allow for gas exchange. So it has a pretty important role for their breathing purposes. So yeah, general body plan. They have an open circulatory system, which means they don't have like blood vessels like we do. Not quite the same kind of deal. It's similar but different, right? So we have our blood is closed circulatory, like it never just opens up and just flushes into the cavity. So there are some that have it and some that don't. There are some that have some vessels and some that don't. Cephalopods have a more closed system, but they use these things called ctenidia for respiration, which is their gills. And so siphons that they have are important for pulling in water. And so when we look at the squid dissection for lab, you'll see the siphon on that thing. And so it's used for movement purposes in some species, other ones just more for movement of water, which carries oxygen, which allows them to breathe. So that's good for them. And they also have something very different. They have hemolymph that counts as their blood, which is kind of a combination of blood and interstitial fluid. So interstitial fluid is the fluid that exists in your bodies, kind of surrounding organs. So it's kind of in between spaces, right? And so with the open circulatory system, blood just kind of gets pumped out and mixes with that tissue and then carries oxygen with it to all the other types of organs that need it. And then it just gets kind of flushed back down into the heart where it'll get pumped back out to get oxygenated again. So it's very, very different. It's a hard concept to really kind of grasp, so you don't have to explain it too much, thankfully. But yeah, open circulatory system, hemolymph, and they have blue blood, which is different. So we do not have blue blood at all. Your veins may look blue, but that's due to light reflection and how deep different wavelengths of light go inside your body. So that's why it looks blue, but it's actually not. They actually have blue blood. So it's because they use a different pigment. So we use hemoglobin, right? And while they use hemocyanin, and that binds with it, and when it's oxygenated, it appears blue. If it's deoxygenated, it has no color at all, which is very, unusual and different. So pretty cool with them. And so, yeah, something different. So yay. And then we also have the hermaphroditic. So some of them are. This depends on the group you're at. Others you have more specific male and female, like Octopus, for sure. They have some specifics, but it just depends. So when it comes to the open circulatory system, how does it work? So let's talk a little more about it. So they have a heart, and it pumps to the body cavity, and that body cavity is called the hemosome. And then once there, the blood was going to mix with the interstitial fluid, and that's where that openness comes in, right? It just mixes in. So mixes together. Gas exchange occurs, so they get the oxygen they need and get rid of any sort of waste products they have. And then the blood's going to go to gills to get oxygenated again, and then go back to the heart. I think I misspoke earlier about the pathway, but that's how you do it. But yeah, that's it. So the blood goes from the heart to the body to the lungs back to the heart, which is very different from how our circulatory system works. We go heart, lungs, heart, body. Theirs is definitely different. In other organisms, you usually go heart, lungs, body. This is odd that it does this way. The advantage, though, is that this works for them. So they're low energy for the most part. They're overall smaller organisms, so they have a lower metabolism. So they don't need a ton of oxygen intake. So they don't need all that complicated processes, all the more energy, intensive procedures that a closed circulatory system may have. So this works for them. The disadvantage is that it is low pressure, so there's not a lot of blood pressure going through, so it's very slow. So they don't get this super, super quick. So if they're a much more active, larger type of organisms, then this would not be as helpful. And so if we think about it, like the squids and the octopi and such, they get bigger, so they have more of the closed variety. I mean, more like the snails, and like those don't get that big, so this works for them. So it's all about adaptations. So here's some different types of blood colors that are possible in case anybody's curious. We have red, of course. Then we can see some other types of organisms that have blue. Then you also have green and violet possible by a variety of different types of worms. So it's kind of cool if you're just curious, and you can see the proteins that are involved with that. So fun facts for all. Here's some of the anatomy we looked at before. So you can see like the mantle, the foot, the shell, gills where they're at, heart, gonads, and digestive system. And so you can kind of see, even though they have very different overall morphological forms, they still have these same structures. Just kind of arranged maybe a little differently, or different types of variations with them. You know, tentacles versus an actual foot. The foot can be smaller, larger, used for locomotion, not used for locomotion. So lots of options there. So it's cool. And so we're going to look at a few different classes of mollusks, the ones highlighted, the ones we're going to talk about. We're going to start off with one of my absolutely favorite phylogenetic names, Polyplacophora. I love these things. Awesome name, awesome creature. Start with him, Polyplacophora. You will see some of these in the lab. I know, I took pictures of them. And so they have these, they're characterized by these plates that they have. So you can see these plates that they form. So it's like a massive kind of roly-poly. It's not a roly-poly. We'll talk about the massive roly-polies later in the ocean that exist. They're terrifying. But this is a different type of organism. This is a mollusk, Polyplacophora shell. So there's a lot of species here. So they have these 8 plates with them. Sometimes it's more visible, other times not. You can have some that are pretty colorful and cool looking, like on the bottom, and then one that kind of looks like a cow pie or just poop that's been liquefied or something. And so some beautiful, some a little less so. You know, maybe it takes a different eye to appreciate. I have a video you'll see in the playlist that goes along with this lecture. So watch those, check those out if you want to see one of these things in action. They kind of like, they're good at planting kind of on the ground, and they'll just feed on algae in the nearby area. And sometimes if they really like suction onto the bottom, they can be hard to lift up, which is, I think, what the video actually shows you there. It's like trying to pull these things off. They can live fresh, like not fresh water, but like more shallow water or deep water, so all up and down the water column. They don't really have eyes on their head. Instead, they kind of have eyes all around their body. So they can kind of pick up on light detection changes as you're moving your hand across them, or like going around, so you can kind of see what's above them in a way. It's not fantastic vision. It's more just kind of like light sensing to see if like a shadow's upon them or not. So you can kind of get a feel for it. Fertilization occurs externally, of course. So they'll release sperm and eggs there. Some will brood their eggs, and then they'll actually hold them until they hatch, which is kind of unusual. And so the one on the top right actually has an internal shell. That's why it looks so weird, while the other one has a larger one. And so the one up top is called the gumboot chitin. And so that's one of the largest ones out there, and it has the internal option. And generally, these are not hermaphroditic, but you have males and females members of the species. Awesome group. So watch the video that's posted for it. Here's some of their anatomy, just, you know, if you're curious what it looks like, but there's not a whole lot you'll be asked to know from this. They have those plates, those valves. They have a foot, mouth structure. The foot is used for suction purposes. Valves, the shell is used for protection. All right, and that's it for Polyplacophorans. Now, gastropods. Everybody's favorite snail, Gary. Let's talk about SpongeBob for a second. So, people like SpongeBob a lot. It was okay. I actually remember watching the first episode when it aired in 1999. So I went and got some Pokemon cards from Toys R Us. I was very excited. It's my first packs of Pokemon cards I got. And I came back, and they were doing like some big like Nick Award show, I think, or something. And they debuted the first like 2 little episodes of SpongeBob. And so that's where he got the job. And then like he met Sandy, I think. And he had to go outside and need water. So I've seen that show since the very first episode, and then like they didn't have episodes again for like a while. I feel like it was like a year later until they had more episodes. I only really watched that one, and that's the one they would show like often was like those same 2. It's kind of annoying. I was definitely more into Rugrats, Hey Arnold, and even Rocket Power at that time. Which, if you haven't watched those shows, watch them. They're fantastic. Do yourself a favor, you know, diversify your cartoon watching portfolio. Check those out. Those are great. Good Times, Wild Thornberries. That was solid. So those are good shows. Anyway, that's SpongeBob. Oh, also, gastropods have way more stuff going on than sponges do. It should be Gary as the main character of the show, and then SpongeBob is the pet who does nothing but sit in a corner. That's the biggest weird thing with this. Like, even like Patrick is kind of dumb. That makes sense. But like Gary being the thing that can't speak and rolls around, like this thing actually has tissues in a body cavity, dude. Like, what does a sponge have? A loose collection of cells. It doesn't have eyes, that's for sure. It doesn't have a nervous system. So it's bananas. It makes no sense. It's what bothers me the most, I think, about SpongeBob is why does he have a pet snail? It makes no sense. If anything, it should be a pet rock dressed up to look like a snail that SpongeBob can't tell isn't real because the thing is stupid. They have no brain. They have no nervous system. That's what it should be. Anyway, that's my rant on Gary the Snail from SpongeBob. Hope you all enjoyed it. Anyway, on to real gastropods. They're made of flames. Not really, it's a Pokemon. But there's a ton of species in here. So there are 60 to 80,000 species of snails that we know of. Tons of species of gastropods. Way more than mammals, which is like all of mammals. These things eclipse them by a mile. It's one of the largest groups of animals out there are these things. Of course, they can be found in freshwater or saltwater or even land environments. You can have the ones with shells, the one without shells. They usually have the head region with the eye stalks popping up with the end of the tentacles there. One of the cool things about them is when they're developing, they go this thing called torsion, to where they kind of like twist and invert their visceral mass, body, mantle, and shell with respect to the head, which is how they actually manage to get themselves to flip and fit inside the shell and move the way they do. It's very unusual, but they do it. It's one of the things that defines this group. So that's a key trait for them. Thinking about those as we look at all these. And so they also have a lot of other adaptations that just vary. I mean, it really depends. There are some birds that only eat on snails. The snail kite, top right, is one that eats on snails. But yeah, they're an amazing group. So many species. I'm a big fan of these things. I think overall, they're just fascinating, and they leave behind huge cells. So I remember reading Lord of the Flies when I was in 9th grade when I watched the video of it, which is what's shown in the bottom left, and they had a conch shell, and so that was like what gave power to whoever had that, got to speak, decide what the action was going to be. I don't remember, and that's made by a snail. So without snails, we wouldn't have Lord of the Flies, which was a pretty dark book and movie, because the kid in the bottom left, I forgot what his name was, but he gets crushed by a rock and dies. It's horrible. So disturbing. Yeah, I don't know what flies have to do with it. I don't really remember much about it at all, because I haven't read it in like 20 years. Well, no, I wasn't in high school. Jeez, that was like 18 years ago. My God. But yeah, anyway. Weird book. Weird movie. Speaking of weirdness, real life is better than movies sometimes. This is one of those cases. This is a snail that is able to build a bubble raft. That's right, a bubble raft. So in order to navigate across the ocean, that sucker will use mucus in its foot to trap air and build up these bubbles, and then just float along the ocean that way, which is pretty insane. And they also have counter shading with their camouflage. They have different colors on top and bottom, so they can actually blend in with this lifestyle. But the colors make sense depending on where they're traveling, so that way they can hide from predators that way. The other one on the bottom right is another snail. This is one that actually likes to collect things from its environment and attach it to its shell. Very much a hoarder of sorts in the snail community. How cool is that? That's so amazing. And then we have the periwinkle, an edible snail. Excuse me. It's an edible snail. If you like to eat it, you can. It's historically found in the Atlantic Ocean, and they can vary their structures depending on where they're found. They can be used for evolutionary studies, depending on if they live in an area with predators present or not. It can depend on how thicker their shell is. And then also, if it's wave heavy, they can have different adaptations to survive in that. This is the conch. It's a big old snail. It's edible. People who eat it. It's found across excuse me, in South America. So they have just a huge shell. They get very big. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Sneezes and yawns out the wazoo. I apologize greatly. And so part of the organisms that they have can be used for other organisms. I'm about to sneeze again. I should pause this. Hold on. Pause. Of course, when I pause, I don't sneeze. Anyway, they can have relationships with other organisms where neither benefits or is hurt in some way, so that's a commensalism. And they can be hunted, so the things can eat them, which is kind of entertaining. So we're actually there's a video I hope you'll get to see where it actually shows some fighting over a shell. But here is something else related to snails. So on the left side, it looks like a vertebrae, but it's actually an egg casing for a whelk snail. So it's a whelk egg casing. And then on the right, of course, is a magical conch, which has all kinds of powers. Check this video out when it's posting their things. Another video, I think this one has to do with zombie snails. What? This snail is cool. It's called the scaly-footed snail. It's found in the hydrothermal vents. It can build its own iron armor, which is amazing. So it actually is able to incorporate iron and build plates out of it on its foot, which is very unusual. One of the few animals, if only the only one, that can do this sort of thing. The patterning and the way they actually arrange their shell and this armor is actually being used and studied for potential biotech purposes to make armor and modify the way cars can be made, which is pretty insane. So it's very flexible and provides fantastic protection against other predators in its environment. They were found in 2001, actually, so they're a very recent species, but found in deep, deep ocean. And so now we have a very interesting case of, we talked about torsion earlier with snails, how they twist. Well, it turns out that's very important when it comes to reproductive purposes. And so if they don't have the right type of clockwise or like arrangement to them, they can't mate. And so if you have a left-sided shell or anti-clockwise shell, spiral shell, it can't mate with another one unless it has that same adaptation. It turns out this is incredibly rare. And there's a snail called Jeremy, which is actually hermaphroditic, but this snail, it was trying to mate with other snails and it wouldn't have it because the parts wouldn't line up. Because if you see the diagram, like they have to be arranged in a certain way. So this snail, like it couldn't find a mate and it was, trying to do its thing. So apparently there's snail enthusiasts with people who love pet snails. And they were trying to do their best to try and, make things happen for Jeremy. Help it find, love in this world. And so that's what they were trying to do. And so when they actually go through and mate, it can take up to 16 hours or 6 hours of like circling around each other, and then firing out love darts that would then pass along the gametes that are needed to form the children, the eggs. And so they have to build a lineup just right. And so old Jeremy actually found love. And so there was another amateur snail scientist who actually found one. And his snail was called Lefty. And they matched up with Jeremy. And so they're looking at the couple, hoping they would actually mate and put together more snails. They hadn't, at the time this was posted, do it. And actually have children. But they're slowly getting close to each other, so hopefully they'll be able to. And then the potential last pair blurb there is pretty funny. Is they actually both ate, so they might be more likely to mate because they actually have energy to do so. But another update on this is that Jeremy dies. But did found love. So what happened was when they found those snails before, it actually turns out to where there was another snail involved in the mix, and two of those were doing their thing while Jeremy was left out. But another one was found, and so he was actually finally able to produce offspring with another snail that fit, and was actually able to keep the gene line going. So it's a rare mutation, so they're trying to figure out also if this is even just a full-on genetic thing, or like what this can be passed on or not, like what will happen. And all the kids are actually right-turned, and so turns out that it's the female side will help determine like what kind of gets passed on. So it's passed on more like the female determines this sort of thing, but apparently those still enough for it to be right-turned kids still. So it was truly fascinating how this story unfolded over a few years. A person with a pet snail just trying to find one that matched up with it, and it shows the importance of physical anatomy. And so some of these organisms, they have to match up, and seeing these sorts of things pop up like this shows how speciation can occur. Someone's in one generation with a thing that causes full-on reproductive isolation. So it's truly remarkable. It's a cute story. I love it. Speaking of cuteness, sea hares. They're called sea hares because like rabbits, kind of. It's actually its nose, though, not its ears, so don't yell at a sea hare in it there, because you're yelling at its nose, and it's kind of weird. It's used to smell. It's usually toxic, so things usually don't eat them. They can also release ink if they're disturbed. There's one that can release toxics that it gets from algae that it feeds on. And they're known for forming long chains of mating pairs. And so they'll form these long sea hair chains. So they're just all, reproducing. And to one, they'll be the male, to the other, be the female. So they're very much hermaphroditic in the same chain. Very different. There are videos out there about that for sure. So if you want to see that, you can find it. And so here's a giant African snail. This joker is huge. It is an invasive species. There's a strict quarantine to prevent this thing from becoming established in the United States because you don't want that to come in. It carries a lot of diseases for plants. It causes extreme damage to plants. It can cause human disease. It's a significant pest worldwide. It can even handle, it can have a nematode in it that can actually cause meningitis, which is a very serious disease in humans. So this jerk, don't let one go if you have one. If you see one, report it to the authorities. Like, hey, there's a giant African snail. Here's Banana Slug. It's a mascot for a college out in Santa Cruz. So it's supposed to be a school mascot. And they're called bananas because they kind of look this way, but they can be a little more green or brown, which I guess real bananas can too. Here's some nudibranchs. So these are some more types of gastropods. They're very colorful, very pretty. Unusual looking forms of marine life. So here's some more little blurs about them. Very colorful. They do not have shells. Found in salt water all around. And they use some of these coloring patterns to either alert that they taste awful because of foods they've eaten or just chemicals they can produce, or for camouflage purposes to help keep them hidden and from dying. So they actually eat food items and then keep some of the poisons of their food and then make them kind of like, okay, you don't want to eat me because I won't kill you, I will mess you up of what I've been eating. It's actually a pretty common strategy to use camouflage or coloration patterns to indicate that, like, oh, I'm poisonous, don't eat me, if you eat me, you'll die. Or as a way to camouflage, obviously. So it's pretty unusual. And some of them can release their chemicals even if just they're touched, so that they're very sensitive to that. So maybe don't touch these things. So now on to cephalopods. Cephalopods are my favorites, for sure. So much coolness here. They have the internal shell. Well, some of them do anyway. The octopus doesn't really have a shell at all. But these are the four main ones we'll look at. And a lot of videos here, so be sure to check out that playlist. And share your favorite mollusks so far. Like, what are some cool ones you found? Share it in the forums. Let us know. Let us know what you like, what you found, what you know about. Spread the animal knowledge. Let's spread the mollusk passion around, see what's what. See what's going on. See what's happening. What's shaking. What's moving. All that good stuff. So let's do it. But first, though, let's talk about some cephalopod traits. They're more carnivorous, so they're fast. They move quick. They can move like a blink of an eye, like a ninja. And they'll feed on things. So they have, jaws. And you'll see this when we do the squid dissection. You'll see some of these parts. They have developed eyes. They can see very well. They're very different. So their eye evolution it's similar to our capabilities, but is not from the same ancestry. They had their own solution to eyes. So it's different and in some ways better than ours. And that they don't have a blind spot like we do, which is very unusual. I'll talk more about their eyes at the end. But they have salivary glands. They can release venom and inject that in, which is pretty cool. And they also have 8 arms or 8 arms with tentacles or many tentacles. So lots of options here. And they have a closed circulatory system, which you'll see. And, well, did I say? For lab. And so they also have an internal shell in the cuttlefish, a reduced shell in the squid in the form of a structure called the pin, and be fully absent in the octopus, or it can be external in the case of the Nautilus. So pretty much any type of option for the shell, these things got it. They can also eject ink. So again, ninja. They can move around, move quick, lightning, sneak up on you, release a smoke bomb, and they just disappear. They can do that. And they have a very well-developed nervous system. And so their nervous system is actually pretty important in our understanding of our nervous systems because there are some giant axons or neurons they can have with long chains of those called axons. And so before we had the ability to really study some of those smaller things, that's how we studied the nervous system, was being able to manipulate those and see how it worked. So a lot of understanding initially of the nervous system came from studying squids. which is really interesting, really different. And some of these are really smart too, these animals. They can actually solve problems. The octopus is one of the most intelligent invertebrates out there, if not the most intelligent. So usually you have to have, if you want to work with a vertebrate, you have to get permission to work with those. Usually it's sort of like experimental manipulation on. But inverts, nobody really cares. Like, do whatever you want. So they're commonly used in a lot of like projects because you don't have to worry about like IACUC regulations, or less so. But with octopi, though, you do have to get approved. So because they're so intelligent, like that's one. It's like, okay, if you want to work with an octopus, you got to get some approvals down. So it's just different. So again, a lot of videos. Check those out. With cephalopods, not as many species, but still a rich amount of diversity and lifestyles found. Extremely intelligent, large, so they can get big with the massive squids out there, which scare me half to death. I have some definite phobias of some squids. Let me tell you something. I mentioned this in the squid lab video, so you might see this twice. So I don't want to repeat stories too much, but I've definitely always had a long fear in my life of going out in the ocean and getting abducted by a giant squid and then fed upon. Is definitely traumatizing. And you see videos every now and then of a giant squid up close. Like Odom Harbor or something, like in shallow water. It's like, yep, that could eat me, cause it's big, and I don't want to die by a giant squid. At the same time, though, like there can't be many human attacks by giant squids. So I'd be kind of like the first one. It's like, oh yeah, this dude Tim died by a giant squid. It's like, well, at least he was the first one to do it, so go down in the history books. But I don't want to be attacked by a giant squid. Sounds horrifying. Man, I'm gonna have a nightmare about that tonight. Anyway, so they have several adaptations. So in regards to predation, moving around, communicating. So we're gonna look at those. Diversity. So this is a GIF. We're gonna watch it together. And so this is from the movie Arrival. And so it's a really good science fiction movie. I really enjoyed it a lot, but they actually had an alien in there that was kind of like a squid type thing. They didn't really show it too much. It was definitely more like a squid, and they released ink to communicate and signals. So I think that was just kind of cool. Intelligence. You don't see a sponge as an alien, that's for sure. So in terms of basic anatomy, this is a good schematic that breaks it down. You'll see this in lab. For the most part, yeah, that's pretty solid. That's not a bad diagram at all. This shows you a male. The females will have nidamental glands, which, it's just there. They'll have those, but siphons, gills, digestive glands can be kind of tough to spot. The ink sac can be slightly harder to see than you would realize. You don't have to recognize the kidney in lab, though. And then here's the octopus feeding anatomy. And so what they have is, you can see that salivary gland. One thing that's neat to note is the closeness of the brain to the mouth. And so what happens is this limits the amount of prey size they can actually ingest, because they eat something that's too big, it'll damage their brain and cause brain damage. So it means they have to actually pull in something and then shred it to pieces using their radula, and then grind it up into pieces and eat something small enough and then ingest it through. If it's too big, it'd hurt the brain. So it's an interesting setup where they don't have that full-on separation, because you can eat something massive, but it's not gonna mess your brain up. So that's just kind of interesting. And you can also see the salivary gland too, where venom can come from. You can also see the suckers present, and of course the beak, which a squid has too. But that radula, that's yikes. And so here's a comparison between the different types of suckers. So you can see suckers are more commonly serrated on squids, meanwhile with octopus a little less so. And so in octopi, they use their tentacles. Squid usually use tentacles for capturing prey, and the octopus really doesn't. They just kind of use arms. They can use their arms to navigate and everything, but they just more like holding, manipulating the food. It's a little. In some of the videos, you'll get to see prey capture in those organisms and how it's a little different. And so this shows the presence of those salivary glands and the beak, and so where they're found. And so multiple cephalopods can do this, the cuttlefish up top. And so they can also, if they're holding these things inside their mouth, they can also release digestive juices in there as well. And so they can start breaking down the organism inside the mouth, which when we do the same thing, right, with saliva. But it's just kind of cool to see them do that too. So one of the coolest squids out there I like is the vampire squid. And so the scientific name is amazing. Vampiroteuthis invernalis. Come on now. It literally means the vampire squid from hell. That is insane. Such a cool organism name. It's not that scary actually. It's more of a it just kind of feeds on things kind of floating. It lives in a low oxygen environment inside the ocean, so they're very kind of lazy and just float around. And they have adaptations to try and avoid predation. And so one of those is the cape behavior you see, where they kind of expands out the tentacles and the webbing around it to show those spines. It tries to fool other predators and think it's like a massive organism with a bunch of teeth in it, so leave it alone. And they can also produce a lot of different types of light too to alarm potential predators and leave them alone. And they don't have ink sacs because they already live in the dark, so ink's not going to do a whole lot of good necessarily. So they have other ways to avoid predation besides just the ink. And so that's that cape behavior that they do to try and avoid predation. And so they're really cool. They get found out in the Pacific Ocean. There's a video of one of those. Hopefully check it out. But they live in the oxygen minimum zone, so yeah, there's not a whole lot of food there for them. And the females are larger than males, which is pretty much the case for most. So here's a thing. So sperm whales are pretty well known. A lot of what we know about giant squids is from sperm whales. So we studied with their stomachs, discovered the beaks, and figured out a proportional relationship where like the bigger the beak is, the bigger the squid is, right? And so we've learned a lot about them in that way. And so it's kind of cool. You can also find on sperm whales like suction marks from their battles with giant squids. So like it's crazy to think about this just engaging on the bottom of the ocean. And I'll be honest, I don't think about sperm whales that much at all. Like when I think about whales, I think about blue whales. That's what I always go to. But like sperm whales are awesome too. They have teeth. They actually go around and be predators. While I mean, blue whales are predators too, but they just filter feed using their baleen structure, which is just different. So cool. And so giant squids are actually thought to be solitary hunters as well. They just move around and just hunt food. And so they've never really found like a group of giant squids, which is nice that we know of. So with the giant squid, one of the more mystifying, I think, creatures out there, they can get really big. These numbers, they can vary a little bit. You know, maybe they can get even bigger than what we already think. Usually females, again, they're larger. And they measure from the tip of the top fins to the tip of the long tentacles. That's where that size comes from. So the actual body isn't that big, but still, man, like that's crazy big. And the weights, look at that, like massive weights. And so this thing is very secretive. It's hard for us to find specimens of, and so we don't really see them that much. But so they've only been widely accepted to exist in the community for like 150 years. So it's not even been that long before, and people just assume them as being a myth. And so they were always, you know, just a fascinating history behind their species, and they're just figuring out if they exist or not. You can find specimens of these at various places. So New Zealand has some areas that are dedicated to it where you can see them. And you can also go to the Smithsonian, and they have some specimens inside of a case. And I was there several years ago now, and I saw one. It was amazing. It was like so cool to see a giant squid in a case like that in person. And one of the reasons why they've gotten so big, and it's hypothesized, is because of what's called deep sea gigantism or abyssal gigantism. And so they live out in this deep sea area, and so they've seen this pattern in other invertebrates and organisms too, where things just get bigger in the deep sea. And so it's kind of unusual. So there's like a giant roly-poly, the Japanese spider crab is big, there's a big fish out there, there's a big stingray that's out there. So yeah, it's kind of just what goes on. They can just get big in this environment, which is kind of unusual. But you may want to eat one of these to have calamari, but don't, because it tastes horrible because it's got ammonia chloride in it, so it's usually not eaten. So you probably don't want to eat it, which is quite unfortunate. You figure if it's going to be that big, you can at least get some, massive chunks of calamari out of it, which I've actually had, by the way. I've had calamari. Ate it at a Joe's Crab Shack in about the year 2000. I don't really eat it that often, so I don't really care for it that much. It's kind of weird. Give me some ketchup and some barbecue sauce, though. I can make it work, but I'd rather not. And here's a giant squid caught in 1873, and this is around a bathtub. Like, this is just a horrifying looking picture, but yeah, they're not glamorous when they're dead, for sure. But they've been mentioned all throughout history, like even like Aristotle and Pliny the Elder, like some of those old like people and old sea travelers would mention seeing giant squids from time to time. It was just definitely gives you an idea of like the Kraken, that sort of thing. Some videos. And here's the beak of a giant squid, and you can see how big that sucker is compared to a person's hand. That's a huge beak, man. They don't just rip you to pieces. And so when you think giant squid, you're like, okay, that's the big daddy of them all. But there's bigger. The colossal squid. Look at this joker. On the top left, you can see a picture showcasing the differences between them. The giant squid can be longer, but the colossal squid is heavier. And look at the hooks on that thing. And there are suckers like that thing can latch onto you and won't let go. The picture that's shown there is the largest one ever recorded for a cephalopod. It was caught in 2007, and so it was very unusual because they were fishing, and so they tried to stop it and not catch it because they didn't want to capture this thing, but it wouldn't let go. It just refused to let go, and so they had to, deal with it. So it became a research specimen. And so they actually looked at the beak of this thing and measured it and found it was smaller than some of the ones they found in sperm whales, which showed that this thing, which was 15 feet long and weighed over 1,000 pounds, was still probably not the biggest one out there. And the red color, I think, adds another menacing version to it. Like, it's so, just dastardly looking. But, it's red because it doesn't really matter. And red light disappears, the fastest. And so, when you're in that deep part of the ocean, you can't be seen. So it's effectively dark and invisible because nobody has the capability to see, that kind of light down there. So it disappears quick. So that's why it has that color to it. It's only really seen, in the north like that. The only kind of shown as being white, but red's the better color to illustrate them. But oh man, it's creepy. So the colossal squid, you can see the scientific name. You can see how big it can get. It's estimated to get up to the largest known invertebrate, the largest documented eyes. Their eyes can be up to 12 to 16 inches in diameter, which is insane. It was discovered in the 1920s, so it's been less than 100 years old, even though it's probably speculated, before that with those sightings. It's found in cold waters, thankfully, but still, I don't want to be, that astro. Man, the one colossal squid went rogue and then ate some dude named Tim just trying to have a good time on the beach. I don't need that in my life. Not at all. But there was a second specimen found near Antarctica, and it's been kept frozen since it was discovered, and that's what the pictures are of, and it's in a museum in New Zealand. So if you're in New Zealand, check out the giant squids they have stored down there, because New Zealand's pretty close to Antarctica. Oh man, sorry, my nose is getting a little stuffy. So the colossal squid, there's not a whole lot known about this thing because it's so hard to find specimens. We only have a few of them, and they're hard to study alive because they're very solitary and it's deep ocean, so it's hard to see and it's dark. The first discovery was made with some tentacles found inside of a sperm whale stomach. That's just kind of neat to see these things. And so they're thought to be more of an ambush style predator. And this definitely gives you an idea of where Kraken stuff could have come from, easily come from stories about giant and colossal squids. And now on to the world of the octopus. Octopus are also cephalopods. They do not have a shell internally, so they can actually squeeze through a lot of very tight spaces. There's some cool videos out there of them squeezing through tiny little slivers of spaces. They can actually use this to camouflage and stay hidden in their environments. Definitely up there for intelligence. I got some articles and videos that go on about that and things they can do. They are venomous. Some can be deadly to humans. The blue-ringed, one of those. And they don't live very long. So normally they live long enough to reach maturity, reproduce, and then die. It's kind of unknown why that goes on, but it's it is what it is for them. So they live, they die, and that's it. One thing that's kind of unusual is they really can't detect the position of their arms in space, just kind of there. So they have to look to see where their arm is to figure out where it's at. And so one of the longest living ones can be up to 5 years. And there's actually a structure called the optic gland that may cause brooding behavior of their eggs, which causes them to not eat and then die. So it's just a thing that happens once it hits. So females will usually die of starvation after this process of holding their eggs, protecting them. And while the males will kind of become senile and just die, and they'll not be as cautious anymore. And so instead of being camouflaged, they'll just be walking around, just having a ball, having a great time. And they'll get. And so there's evidence they have memory, so they can remember short and long-term things. They can engage in play. There's tons of stories about their intelligence capabilities from various things being studied in aquarium, research labs, etc. They've been shown to use tools of some kind. They can mimic their environment extremely well, and they can also taste what they touch. So there's actually a video, hopefully it's included, I can't remember, of an octopus actually grabbing onto like people's arms, and they can actually like kind of taste the person, which is weird. I want to have that experience. I want to have an octopus latch onto my arm with its suckers. Not die, of course, but in a safe aquarium type environment. But I don't know, it just seems intriguing to me. Like, I've always liked octopus a lot, so I don't have a Dr. Octopus picture. That's a shame. It's a great Spider-Man villain. I have an action figure coming soon for Dr. Octopus. But they can vary greatly in where they're found and their size. Largest ones can be the giant Pacific. Some can be very small. Some can live in very deep depths. So definitely a lot of videos because it's amazing. There's also a case of a little more recently. So this is about 10 years ago. This story came out. An aquarium had a bunch of seawater going everywhere in the new area, and it turns out an octopus, the octopus shown there in the picture, had broken the recycling valve down on the system, and so it just caused water to spew everywhere. Because it was curious, it's like to play with things. And so there's also stories of, you know, some of them getting out in the middle of the night when the people were left and sneaking into other tanks and eating fish. And then like this involved moving lids back and forth, so it actually looked like they had not moved at all, but they would do it and like walk around like on the tables. And there's also other ones of it like playing with a pill bottle that was given to it. There's like throwing it through like water jets inside of its tank, so they're really pretty amazing. And it seems it can actually recognize different people based off of like their suckers and tasting different people. They know like different folks. And definitely the mimic octopus is one that can actually mimic other organisms in its environment, and so we can see it mimicking a flounder, a lionfish, and a sea snake. All three things to help it, well, avoid predation or just sneak around. And so they can also sometimes mimic a crab and make it look like it's going to mate with another crab and then just eat it instead. So this thing is pretty dastardly. This thing was thought to be an example of like a giant octopus for a long time. This was found way back in the early 1900s. And then over years and years of analysis of this thing, they figured out that it was just whale blubber. But they thought it was a massive octopus. Maybe they kraken at one point. So it's nice to see science solve some of these mysteries. Even though a giant kraken will be cool. This GIF, I hope it plays for you in the video. I'm actually not sure. Displays some of the camouflage capabilities of an octopus and like how well it can blend in with its environment. But in nature, it's important to remember there's always other things around the corner as well waiting to get you. And that was in fact a stingray that preyed upon that octopus. And you can see the ink released by the octopus is a last-ditch effort, but it was not enough. So even a thing as smart and able to camouflage as an octopus is still not prone or able to prevent full-on predation against it. So that's kind of cool. Here's the blue ring, very deadly. It produced a thing called the trodotoxin, which can be serious. It's also found in fugu, so that can be very dangerous. Talk about that with fish, but this thing can cause full-on cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, so you can just die from severe paralysis and heart failure. So it can be fatal within minutes, so do not touch these things. They have painless bites, so you don't even necessarily know you've been bitten if you've been bit by one. And the goal is to just like prevent its prey from moving, then it just eats it. And they will flash their blue colors when they're pissed off. So like that lets you know like, oh, this thing is mad at me, it's going to come after me. So it does that pulsating behavior to try and let things leave it alone. So it's a fantastic way to let people know if you mess with me, you will die. So it's pretty impressive. You need life support measures to survive if you've been attacked. Usually that's for like about 24 hours, and if you can make it through that point, you'll usually be okay. No antivenom yet. So okay, there's their brain. So we talked about this earlier. We see the esophagus where food will travel through, and if it goes too much, it'll engulf and destroy the brain. So that's why they kind of a little more limited. And so also kind of the thinking is with their intelligence, they don't have a shell, so they rely on other more unique ways to try and stay hidden. So it's matched up with their camouflage and navigating and learning and understanding and analyzing their environment to stay alive. Alright, so now we're at the cuttlefish. So this is going a little long, but we're nearing the end. I'm sorry. I normally talk about mollusk for like 2 lectures at least, so I usually put a lot of time into this. This is short in comparison. They have a unique internal shell. They have W-shaped pupils. They have also considered to be very intelligent with a large brain to body size ratio, and they have something called a cuttle bone shown on the right side, which is used for buoyancy. It's supposed to have like a swim bladder to help it navigate in the water column, to help it try and navigate up and down inside of that. Also got the Nautilus. But so they can't see color, which is unique. However, they are fantastic for the ability to match color of their surroundings. So somehow they're picking up all those subtleties of their environment because of somehow they can interpret it and then match it almost perfectly so they can stay hidden around and not get preyed upon. It is insane. And they do it in the darkness. They have no blind spot in their eye, which is true of the cephalopods, and they have 3 hearts, which is also true for some of those other ones, like the squid for sure. So some of these are just kind of general cephalopod traits. Others are more unique to the cuttlefish. It's important to know like example species, some of the uniqueness of here, be able to discuss the diversity of some of these groups and what makes them unique, what makes them special, all that sort of thing. And that's here. It's thinking that they may be able to actually have well-developed eyes before they're actually born. So while they're in their egg, they're observing their environment and picking up on and learning about it, and helping them learn how to survive. Here's some of the tentacles, and they can actually be used to move around and carry objects. They can also be used for grasping prey. The arms are. So their arms are used for grasping prey, and they have these elongated tentacles that helps with that. They eat, fish, shrimp, all that sort of stuff. They can change the color of their skin. They can move their arms around too, and kind of mesmerize their prey items. So they're kind of like doing this flashing light display and moving their arms around, looking all funky, and just kind of like lure them in to eat. It's like, ooh, I've been hypnotized, and they'll eat you, which is pretty alarming. And then it's crazy. So that's one of the things they can do. And they also do like various defensive behaviors too with their arms to try and like let them know like, hey, leave me alone. So here's the cuttlefish. So they're all venomous. Some may be as lethal as blue-ringed. Males can have dominance struggles with that. They don't usually fight because that's not usually advantageous for animals because it can lead to decreased like you're not as bigger, so it can lead to a decrease in your ability, your physical actual fitness that they have, and so then neither one is actually able to reproduce if they win the fight. It's usually like a bluffing display to see who's going to back down first. After the mating attempt, the male will guard the female until she actually lays the eggs. Otherwise, somebody else can come along and steal the mating attempt. And they can actually use camouflage to gain matings. This is truly amazing. So one of the things they can do is a male can look on one side like a female, and then look on the other side like a male, and then just kind of saddle up next to a female, make other males think nothing's going on while secretly courting the female at the same time, because males and females have different patterns to them on their surface. And they can also fake holding an egg sac. They fake looking like a female. The males have extra arms, so they can actually conceal that too. So they can really do a lot of things to try and be very, very sneaky with their mating attempts. And even though if they've mated with a female, they can still lose that female and lose those that situation, that ability to have those eggs. And so there's more males than females, which is why there's female choosiness in this group for sure. And so this is an example of that. So you can see the female on the left, and then on the right side, you have an individual that seems to be like a two-face, split down the middle. The left side, it's showing the male form with the stripes to try to lure in the female. And on the right side of that same cuttlefish, it looks like a female. So if another cuttlefish is swimming by and it's a male, it looks at this and goes, hey, look, just 2 cuttlefish ladies hanging out on the town. So this is a good way for them to avoid a fighting attempt and be very sneaky. In those videos, again, check those. Alright, and so lastly, the Nautilus. This is inspiration for the good Pokemon Omastar, or Omanite. Big fan of that thing. You can see one thing that stands out here is the chambers. So these have that external shell. We haven't really seen that too much yet. And then those extensive chambering units. So that's a very unique trait for the Nautilus. They're considered more living fossils because they really haven't changed much for millions and millions of years. So they don't really have as great a vision as the other cephalopods do. Intelligence probably a little lower as well. They're able to move up and down the water column using the chambers that they have. They're able to kind of adjust what's inside of there to allow them to move up and down. So they can go really high up, really deep. It just depends. They'll move kind of throughout the day sometimes. So at night they'll move shallower, and then at nighttime they'll go deeper. If they go too far, they'll explode, or excuse me, they'll implode. They'll get crushed to death. So you don't want that to happen. So they've been around a long time. They have those tentacles that can help them. They're very strong grip they can use to help with the whole feeding a whole thing there. And they're trying to figure out how smart this thing is. They're kind of unknown. Males have something called a spadix, which is kind of a unique organ for them. It's a reproductive organ. So yeah, they're just kind of a different looking thing. I think they look awesome. So I really like them a lot. I've seen a shell in person before. That was pretty cool. I think I've seen one in an aquarium before, but I don't remember. So I really need to see another one again. Like, I love the way they look. They're such a unique name. I love the name. I love the way they look. It's just a cool looking creature. And I love the Pokemon based off. It's better than Kabuto, that's for sure. Yeah, there's Nautilus video, and then bivalves. Lame old bivalves. So, no, these are cool. So, these are the clams, oysters. If you like eating these things, that must be nice, but I'm not really a big fan. 9,000 species. They filter feed, so they don't have the radula, right? So, they don't have those structures. No real distinct head region. Their main job is just drive water across them, open and close as needed, and feed and eat, and respirate, so exchange gases. And during they have as forms. Some gastropods actually feed on bivalves, and you can see the hole inside of there. That's where a snail bored into it using its radula. That's how strong that sucker is. And they suck out the body. And it takes hours for this to happen. So this bivalve is just sitting there while a snail's on top of it, slowly boring a hole in there to suck the thing out and kill it, which is pretty insane. So if you see, like, if you're collecting shells and you see holes in them like this, that means a snail ate it. This shows you the movement of water and how it dries across. And so if mouth comes in, it moves across, goes around the system, goes across the gills, carries out waste, carries in oxygen, and also moves food around as well. So that's how it feeds. Movement of the water. And then the largest living is the giant clam. See how big this thing can get. It can live a very long time. It may have algae embedded in its shell, so the algae can receive sunlight in that way, so they have a weird little symbiosis. There's one thought of as like a killer clam or a man-eating clam, but they're not gonna like hurt you. Like, it's fine. Like, it can close on you, but like you make it stuck. But I mean, like, it's not gonna eat you or anything. But they're hermaphroditic usually, and they reproduce via sexual reproduction. They can't self-fertilize though. There's only about 10 living species of these things too when they're found. And this odd-looking thing is one of the largest burrowing clams in the world, the Pacific Geoduck. Sounds like a Pokemon. It can live a very long time. They are actually harvested, and this is actually done in an episode of Dirty Jobs. And they're actually eaten and represent a very well-profiting industry. A lot of money is made off of these suckers. And that siphon can be over 3 feet long as they bury inside the sediment. So you have to go around and just dig these up. And again, you can it's featured in a pretty good episode of Dirty Jobs. And then nearing the end here, we have eye evolution. So we've looked at all the so again, big time convergent evolution. And so our eye has kind of worked kind of backwards in a way, in the fact that we have a blind spot based on how the neurons have to travel to leave the eye, involving the optic nerve. Meanwhile, they don't have that in the octopus, that more complex eye that they have. So they don't have that at all. And so what's interesting is, like, the most recent common ancestor for the mollusk group and us is something that had, like, at most a simple, like, braid just to see basic light. That's it. But for them, like, we just split. So 2 different ways to view things. It's just really, really cool how this came together. Like, a huge example of convergent evolution. And so, like, there's differences too with, like, the structure of the eye. Ours can survive outside of water, of course, while the octopus cannot, or the cephalopod cannot. It's just very different. Alright, that finishes up mollusk. Again, check those videos out. Hope you enjoyed it. This is a long one, probably one of the longer ones we'll have, honestly, so I'm sorry about that. But I mean, at least you can pause it and start it and stop it whenever you need to. That was it. Thank you, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you keep watching. And that ends our first week of online lectures. So fun times.